On this Saturday night, paying civil servants to stay home. Taxpayers are on the hook for hundreds of millions in paid leave to government employees who claimed they couldn't work during the COVID-19 lockdown.
We should not be in a situation where there's one class of workers that works for the government and then there's everyone else.
Pandemic pub protest. Hundreds of bars in Texas reopen, defying a state order. Plus, here comes Hannah. The first hurricane of the season bears down on the southern United States. And
he wants to be a millionaire.
Saying goodbye to a TV legend.
Global National with Robin Gill. Reporting tonight, Jeff Semple.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. The COVID-19 pandemic has forced millions of Canadians to work from home, and it hasn't always been easy. Many struggling to juggle childcare and adjust to new ways of working. But a new report from Canada's budget watchdog is raising eyebrows. It's revealed that scores of civil servants were being paid to stay home during the pandemic without having to work. Mike Le Couteur has been digging into this report for us and joins us now from our Ottawa bureau with the details. Mike.
Well, Jeff, when unionized federal civil servants can't report for work for reasons beyond their control, such as the COVID-19 pandemic, they can use a special leave known for its pay code, 699. Now, the pandemic prevented a lot of people from being able to work for a variety of reasons, and it's estimated that cost the government more than $500 million in lost productivity. The report from the country's budget watchdog shows between March 15th and May 31st of this year, more than 76,000 public servants took some kind of paid leave. And because not all departments supplied numbers, the total cost could be between $439 and $623 million. 70% of that went to the Canada Revenue Agency. It had the highest number of employees who were granted a 699 leave. Their union says one of the reasons is because they didn't have access to proper secure technology to do their jobs.
In some cases, yes. I mean, there had to be firewalls established and that. And as I said, for the protection of people's information.
The Canadian Taxpayers Federation says this special leave creates two tiers of workers in this country.
As the PBO rightly knows, there's no similar thing available anywhere in the private sector. And we should not be in a situation where there's one class of workers that works for the government and then there's everyone else.
Another union president disagrees, pointing to the CERB and wage subsidy programs.
The federal government has promised $82.6 billion for private sector help. So the $439 billion seems like a drop in the bucket, comparatively speaking.
The PBO report noted fewer employees used that leave as the weeks wore on in the pandemic. A spokesperson for Treasury Board President Jean-Yves Duclos said in a statement, as expected, we are now seeing a dramatic decline in the use of this leave as more regular government and private sector services and operations are restored. One government source told Global News, on average, employees took 50 hours of paid leave during the pandemic. So if you do the math, that's just over a week of work lost during a pandemic that is stretching into its 5th month. Jeff?
Mike Le Couteur reporting from Ottawa. Thanks, Mike. Well, hundreds gathered in Toronto this afternoon to honor the life of Regis Korchinski-Paquet. Her family held a memorial and walk for justice outside the apartment building where she fell to her death nearly 2 months ago. Police say they were called to her home back on May 27th for a possible assault, but her mother says she wanted officers to take her daughter to a mental health facility. Ontario's police watchdog is now investigating the 29-year-old's death. Its findings are expected as early as next month. And Korchinsky-Paquet's death is also renewing calls for police body cameras. Officers in Toronto, like most others across the country, do not wear the controversial cameras. Global News has learned Quebec Provincial Police purchased more than 200 cameras a few years ago, but not a single one has been used. Dan Spector explains why.
Somewhere in the hulking headquarters of the Sûreté du Québec, dozens of body cameras that could be recording police interactions with the public have been collecting dust for 3 years. SQ officers want to use them, according to their union president. We've been asking the employer to conduct a pilot project for a few years now, says Pierre Veilleux. This contract document obtained by Global News shows that in 2017, the SQ bought 169 body cameras, 33 dashboard cameras, and cloud space to store the videos for $560,000. They even created a training program for officers with the goal of launching a pilot project, but it never happened. Why? The union claims Quebec's Crown prosecutors are to blame for the unused cameras.
For
them, it's a major problem, he told Global News. Veilleux said Crown prosecutors are concerned about having the manpower and the equipment necessary to view, manage, and bring body camera evidence to court. It would considerably increase their workload, so for them, it was hard to accept, Veilleux explained. But in Calgary, every frontline police officer has been equipped with a body camera for over a year now. How did Crown prosecutors make it work there?
It certainly required additional resources.
Jonathan Hack was an Alberta Crown prosecutor for more than 30 years. When he left in 2018, body cameras were beginning to be implemented in Calgary.
It would be a shame for any prosecution service to say, no, we would rather not have this potentially valuable evidence because we don't have the capacity to process it.
Montreal defense lawyer Philip Schneider says Quebec prosecutors have no trouble using other types of video evidence.
We have the technology to bring to court social media evidence, people filming things with their cell phones. We have the technology to bring to court the evidence of surveillance cameras. I'm sure the technology exists to bring this to court, too.
The Quebec Crown Prosecutor's Office refused to comment on Veilleux's claims, telling Global News only that they had provided a legal opinion on body cameras to the SQ, leaving any decision up to the police force. They would not tell us what was in the legal opinion. When we filed an access to information request to get it, a request was denied. Veilleux hopes widespread demands for greater police accountability push the SQ to finally start the pilot project by the end of the year. Dan Spector, Global News, Montreal.
Ceremonies are now underway in Alabama to honor the life of civil rights hero and Congressman John Lewis.
This community is honored that you're here, and we mourn and grieve with you and pray for you. Thank you very much.
Speaking at the funeral, the mayor of his hometown noted the irony of Alabama state troopers carrying the casket. Troopers brutally beat Lewis back in 1965 during a civil rights march on Edmund Pettus Bridge. His casket will now be carried over that same bridge in Selma as part of a week-long procession spanning 5 cities. Lewis passed away last week after a 6-month battle with cancer. He was 80. Well, turning now to the pandemic. COVID-19 cases are soaring across the United States. There are now more than 4 million confirmed infections, and the U.S. is nearing a grim milestone as more than 146,000 Americans have died. Florida is one of the hardest hit areas in the country. On average, a person is dying from the virus in that state every 11 minutes. As Jennifer Johnson explains, the surge in cases is forcing many states to bring back restrictions.
Hundreds of bar owners in Texas reopened their doors Saturday in protest of Governor Greg Abbott's shutdown order. The owners are fed up with losing so much revenue as cases and deaths from COVID-19 continue to rise in their state.
Our customers need us, my employees need us, our owners need us, and this is too good to let go.
Abbott is now considering locking down Texas again. Hospitals in Houston and those near the Mexico border are struggling to keep up with the constant and growing flow of COVID-19 cases and hospitalizations. Texas, Florida, and California are now considered 3 New Yorks by White House coronavirus doctors as outbreaks surge. But cases are rising in other states too. New rules in Nashville are banning party buses, although some apparently didn't know it yet. Many residents want more restrictions.
We're like a dog chased through the tail. We're not getting nowhere.
The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services is processing almost 800,000 COVID-19 tests a day, but results are taking up to 2 weeks to get back, with many people struggling to quarantine while they wait.
They're asking people to stay in, not do anything, not be around anybody else, and put your life on hold.
The National Institutes of Health is spending $1.5 billion on developing a rapid test like the rapid strep test, but there's no timetable yet on when it will be available to the public.
None of us are going to be happy until that's under 48 hours, but we're making all our efforts to do that.
This weekend, Florida opened up 5 additional federal testing sites to get more people screened, as that state and others try to get a handle on this relentless pandemic. Jennifer Johnson, Global News, Washington.
In Texas, the governor is contending with the impact of COVID-19 as the state faces another threat. Hurricane Hannah, the first hurricane of the season, is now bearing down on the state's southern coast. Hannah, a Category 1 storm, made landfall with sustained winds of 150 kilometers an hour with even stronger gusts. Hurricane warnings are now in effect, and flooding is also a major concern from a storm surge that could bring more than a meter of water ashore. Governor Greg Abbott is urging people in the storm's path to stay safe, but also to stay physically distant from one another. For those unable to remain in their homes, temporary shelters will be set up with extra effort to sanitize the facilities and stop the spread of COVID-19 among those people needing a safe place to stay. Breaking news in the entertainment world tonight. American TV legend Regis Philbin has passed away at the age of 88. Philbin entered show business back in the 1950s, rising to fame as the host and namesake of his morning show. He was also the host of the game show Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Philbin won 5 daytime Emmys, including a Lifetime Achievement Award. Laura Podesta looks back at his life and legacy.
Regis Philbin was one of the most familiar entertainers on television. He's said to have logged more hours in front of the camera than anyone else in the history of the medium. In more recent years, Philbin was the first host of the very popular TV game show Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, which tested contestants' knowledge of trivia.
And it's going to make it your final answer. I'm going to do that. You're right for 250.
For 23 years, he served as co-host on Live with Regis and Kathy Lee, and later Live with Regis and Kelly, when Kelly Ripa replaced Kathy Lee Gifford. The Bronx, New York native was always prepared with a story, joke, and a smile. He appeared as a guest on countless other shows, including on CBS's Late Show after David Letterman announced his retirement.
But now you're leaving.
Yeah, that's right.
So where does that leave Regis?
I don't care.
Where am I going to go?
I don't know.
In a statement, Philbin's family said, "We thank his fans and admirers for their incredible support over his 60-year career and ask for privacy as we mourn his loss." Regis Philbin was 88 years old. Laura Podesta, CBS News, New York.
And the music world is also mourning the loss of one of its greatest guitarists, Peter Green, the blues rock legend and co-founder of Fleetwood Mac, one of the biggest bands of all time.
We're now going to do our latest single called Oh Well.
Tonight, the 73-year-old is being remembered as one of the best and most influential blues guitarists of his generation. Born in London, Green was a singer-songwriter in the band's early days, but his career was cut short by mental illness. He left Fleetwood Mac in 1971 and was later inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, along with his 7 former bandmates. In a statement, Green's family says he died peacefully in his sleep. Well, the doctor isn't in. Coming up, a Canadian chief of medicine drops out of the NFL. And university classrooms may be closed this fall, but what does that mean for tuition fees? The answer next. Welcome back. There's a growing online petition to reduce university tuition fees across Canada for the fall semester. Some schools are raising costs despite shifting most classes online during the pandemic. And as Alicia Draus reports, some students are giving those tuition fees a failing grade.
There's no roadmap for how to provide higher education during a pandemic, so schools are following advice from public health officials and limiting group gatherings, meaning most classes will be taking place online this fall. But students are raising some concerns. When the pandemic first hit in March, universities scrambled to complete the last few weeks of the semester online.
A lot of the in-depth learning that could have been done didn't get to be fully fleshed out.
It's why students are calling for reduced tuition, but many universities are going the opposite direction, from up 3% at universities in Nova Scotia to a near 4% increase at the University of Winnipeg, and an additional 7% for new students at the University of Calgary. Fourth-year St. Mary's University student Michaela Dickens says it's unfair to students.
We're getting less of an education, in our opinion, for more cost.
She studies anthropology, and much of her education is enhanced by hands-on experiences.
In order to really study the course itself, you actually have to be physically there to see the bones, or if you're doing landscape archaeology, you kind of need to be there and using the equipment to know what you're doing.
But universities are defending tuition increases. In many cases, they say the increase is part of multi-year agreements. And Universities Canada, which represents universities across the country, says switching to online doesn't mean the cost of offering programs has decreased. In some cases, it costs more.
It's not just simply transferring content online. It's redesigning the courses, thinking about new forms of pedagogy, thinking about new tools and new resources that are available to bring into the online experience.
To help students, universities and governments are increasing the availability of financial aid. But still, many students say online is not what they signed up for. And already in Quebec, some students are seeking permission to file a class action lawsuit calling for a partial refund of last semester's tuition. Alicia Draus, Global News, Halifax.
Still ahead, Lebanon's urgent crisis as a perfect storm piles onto the country.
You're watching Global National.
Welcome back. Another COVID-19 vaccine candidate is entering human trials. The All India Institute of Medical Sciences in New Delhi administered the first dose on Friday. The candidate vaccine is called Covaxin. Nearly 24 potential vaccines are now in various stages of human testing worldwide. India has recorded more than 1.3 million confirmed cases of the new coronavirus. That's the third highest in the world. Lebanon, meanwhile, is grappling with its worst economic crisis in modern history. It's pushed tens of thousands of people into poverty and triggered the largest anti-government protests in more than a decade. High inflation and unemployment, shortages of food and medicine are just some of the problems affecting millions. And as Redmond Shannon reports, there's no solution in sight.
Lebanon has seen plenty of hardship over the years, from its own civil war to the more recent influx of refugees from Syria. Now, the country is on its knees again. At least one man appeared to have had enough, protesters blaming his suicide on desperation, poverty and hunger. The economic and political crisis ramped up last fall, with protests triggered by proposed new taxes. And then came COVID-19, suddenly tipping the economy over the edge.
So the people that used to be, let's say, middle class, now they don't exist anymore. Middle class has disappeared because everyone needs help.
Lebanon imports almost everything, but the value of its currency has effectively dropped to 1/6 of its official value. Banks are limiting withdrawals. Stores have nothing to sell. Hospitals are rationing treatments.
Over 40-50% of people unable to access food, water, drinkable water.
We are in debt just to buy bread, eggs and cheese, says this woman. With money almost worthless, some people are bartering for food on Facebook groups. Protesters blame incompetence and corruption, demanding a total overhaul to Lebanon's unique form of government, a system that means it is always being torn between regional and global powers, namely Iran, Saudi Arabia and the West.
There is no easy solution to this that does not require turning a blind eye to bolstering elements of Lebanese society that have been part of the problem. There is no international will at all from any side in order to allow the people to manifest their will to overhaul that system.
A bailout from the International Monetary Fund has been stalled too, with disagreements over the scale of the funds needed and the terms of the loan. And new heavy sanctions imposed on neighbouring Syria by the US could stifle a source of funds for Lebanon, albeit Iranian money funneled to one of Lebanon's main powers, the political and militant group Hezbollah.
And that's why the Caesar Act is so crippling for Lebanon, not because it would provide a solution, but because if you can implement damage limitation, the Caesar Act prevents you even from doing that.
A perfect storm of history, politics and a pandemic that's leaving Lebanon bereft of solutions. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
Still ahead, birthday protest honoring a boxer's legacy while unwrapping a dark chapter of Halifax history. Well, take a look at this. A powerful moment during last night's delayed season opener between the Blue Jays and Tampa Bay Rays. 4 Toronto players took a knee during the U.S. national anthem in solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement to shine a major league spotlight on racial injustice. And a mural of Canadian World Boxing Champion George Dixon was unveiled at the site of Africville in Halifax. Africville was built by black settlers back in the 1800s, but was demolished by the city in the 1960s for industrial development. Well, today, dozens joined a peaceful protest on what would have been the boxer's 150th birthday, fighting to preserve his legacy and honor the site. Canada's Super Bowl champion and the NFL's first ever practicing doctor has decided to opt out of the upcoming season. Laurent Duvernay-Tardif says he won't suit up because of COVID-19 concerns. The right guard for the Kansas City Chiefs is already working on the front lines of the pandemic in Montreal, swapping shoulder pads for scrubs, and is the first NFL player to sideline himself from the upcoming season. He says despite all the stringent protocols, quote, some risks will remain. And that is Global National for this Saturday. I'm Jeff Semple. Tonight's Your Canada is Blackstrap Lake near Saskatoon. We'd love to see your Canada, so please send us your photos to viewers at globalnational.com. Thanks for watching. We'll see you back here again tomorrow. Have a great night.